Before we begin, this story is inspired by the web novel Omniscient Readers' Viewpoint. The events, voices, and narration you're about to hear are my own adaptation. Welcome back, fellow survivors, or welcome for the first-time listeners to the end of the world. If you are listening to this, you are part of the story now, so make sure you're subscribed and have your notifications on. You won't want to miss a single moment of what comes next. Now close your eyes and let's return to that subway car the moment everything changed. Let us proceed with episode 3. The silence that followed the message wasn't empty. It was heavy, suffocating, like the air itself had turned into lead, forcing its way down our throats. For a heartbeat, just a single, stretched-out second, no one moved. We were statues frozen in a tableau of modern confusion, gripping our smartphones like talismans that had suddenly lost their magic. Then the chaos broke. It didn't start with a scream, but with a murmur, a ripple of disbelief that quickly boiled over into panic. What is this? Is this a terrorist attack? Why isn't the train moving? The voices overlapped, layering one another until it became a wall of white noise, a cacophony of fear bouncing off the carriage's metal walls. Beside me, the woman I had been speaking to, the one with the kind eyes and the shaky hands, was frantically tapping at her screen. Her fingers were trembling so violently that she could barely hit the icons. She was trying to call the police, desperation etched into every line of her face. "It's not connecting," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Why won't it connect?" I looked at her, really looked at her. In any other reality in the world that existed 5 minutes ago, she would be just another commuter worrying about reports or dinner plans. But here she was a victim in waiting. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me, a cold, detached clarity that felt alien yet familiar. I knew this scene. I knew it not from memory, but from text. "It's okay," I found myself saying, my voice steadily cutting through the rising panic near us. "Just stay calm. Panicking won't help." I was playing the role of the rational observer, the anchor, but inside my mind, my thoughts raced, cataloging every detail, comparing reality to the pages I had read for over a decade. This was the start of the opening chapter, where the logic of the old world crumbles. And then he stood up. From the crowd of cowering passengers, a figure rose, commanding space not just with his size, but with his presence. He was wearing a military uniform, the fabric stretched tight across broad shoulders. He didn't look scared, he looked alert. He looked like a weapon that had just been unsheathed. "Everyone, please calm down." His voice was bark, authoritative and trained. "I am a lieutenant serving in the army. I will take charge of this situation until rescue arrives." The military man is the soldier. I watched him, and a spark of recognition ignited in my brain. I knew him. Not personally, but I knew his character, his unshakable loyalty, his rigidity, his strength. His name is Lee Hyun-sung. He was straight out of the novel, a supporting character who was defined by his shield-like protectiveness. Seeing him here, breathing, sweating, shouting orders, it made the surreal nightmare solidify into rock-hard reality. The fiction had bled into the world, and now flesh and blood people were looking to him for salvation. "Check the doors," he commanded, pointing to a few able-bodied men. "We need to secure the perimeter and check on the other carriages." He was doing exactly what a soldier should do, exactly what a hero in a disaster movie does. But I knew that the rules of this genre were different. High above us, or perhaps deep inside our minds, I could feel it watching. The Dokkaebi, the creature that had started this twisted game show. I imagined it floating with its invisible legs crossed, eating its popcorn, amused by the ants scurrying around in their metal box. It was feeding on this confusion, drinking in the terror like a fine wine. To the entity, we weren't people, we were content. And speaking of content, the soldiers' attempts to organize the passengers were interrupted by a new sound, a digital chime that echoed from a dozen pockets at once. It wasn't the scenario message this time. It was broadcast. "Look!" Someone shouted, holding up their phone. "It's the Prime Minister." The Prime Minister is addressing the nation. The mood in the carriage shifted instantly. The panic didn't vanish, but it transformed into a desperate, hungry hope. People huddled together, their shoulders touching, eyes glued to the small, glowing screens of their devices. Even the soldier stopped his posture, relaxing slightly as he looked at the nearest screen. They were looking for an adult to give them authority, someone to tell them the nightmare was over, that the government was coming to save them, that the laws of physics and society still applied. On the screen, an older man in a suit was standing at a podium, microphones thrust in his face. He looked shaken, sweat beading on his forehead, but he was speaking. "Citizens," the tinny voice from the speakers intoned, "do not panic. We are aware of the acts of terrorism. We are mobilizing." I watched the faces around me soften. They believed him. They wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. They were clinging to the old world, the world where help always comes, where the police arrive in 5 minutes, where the good guys win. But I looked at the smartphone screen, and then I looked up at the empty air where I knew the Dokkaebi was hovering. I tightened my grip on my phone. I knew what was coming next. This wasn't a rescue. This was the setup for a punchline. A cruel, bloody punchline. The hope in the carriage was palpable, fragile as glass, and just as easy to shatter. We watched, breathlessly, waiting for the promise of salvation, unaware that we were staring into the abyss. The smartphone screen flickered with a digital heartbeat in the palm of a trembling hand. We were all watching the Prime Minister, listening to the hollow promise that order would be restored, that the police were coming, that the nightmare was just a temporary glitch in the system. "We are mobilizing all available units," the man in the suit said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Please remain where you are and await instructions. Do not." And then the sound cut out. It wasn't a loss of signal. It was a wet, tearing sound. On the screen right behind the Prime Minister, something moved. A shadow, small and fast, blurred across the podium. The Prime Minister's eyes went wide not with authority, but with the primal realization of prey. In high definition, we watched his head snap back, a fountain of crimson erupting from his neck like a broken pipe, spraying the camera lens, spraying the flag behind him. The broadcast didn't end. It just changed. The man fell, sliding out of frame, leaving only the empty podium and the spreading stain of red. A collective gasp sucked the air out of our train carriage, a sound of pure, unadulterated shock. The hope that had filled the room a moment ago didn't just die, it was murdered right there on the screen. Then it appeared. The creature, the Dokkaebi, floated into view on the broadcast, hovering over the corpse of our nation's leader. It looked into the camera, staring directly at us through the screen, its eyes gleaming with malicious delight. "Did you really think someone was coming to save you?" The creature's voice was high, mocking, dripping with condescension. "I told you this isn't a game you can pause. This is reality now, and you're wasting time." The screen flashed the image of the bloody podium, then replaced it with a stark, glowing timer. 10 minutes. The numbers started counting down immediately, 9:59 seconds, then 9:58 seconds. The silence in the carriage was shattered. 10 minutes. Someone screamed. 10 minutes until what? What happens in 10 minutes? Panic, raw and animalistic, took hold. The soldier, the man who had tried to take charge, was shouting again, trying to maintain order, but his voice was lost in the rising tide of hysteria. "Stay back. Don't push." But no one was listening to soldiers anymore. The authority of the old world had died with the man on the screen. I stood still amidst the churning crowd, an island of terrifying calm. My eyes scanned the carriage, searching desperately. Where is he? I knew the story. I knew the genre. In a story like this, when the world ends, the protagonist appears. The regressor, the one who has lived this nightmare before, the one who knows the path to survival. Jung-hyuk. He should be here. He should be in this carriage or the next one. Why haven't I seen him? Why hasn't the hero stepped forward to crush the scenario with his overwhelming power? Doubt began to creep into my mind, a cold worm of fear. What if the story had changed? What if I were alone in this narrative? A scream from the next carriage tore through my thoughts. It was a muffled, agonizing shriek followed by the heavy thud of bodies hitting the metal door connecting our cars. "Open the door." Someone yelled from our side, pulling frantically at the handle. But the door wouldn't budge. It wasn't locked by a key. It was locked by the scenario. Through the thick glass of the connector door, we saw blurry shapes, shadows moving violently, red smears appearing on the window pane. They were dying in there. The realization hit the passengers like a physical blow. We were trapped, sealed in a metal coffin with a ticking clock. The Dokkaebi showed up at our location again, looking bored and restless. "You humans are so hesitant," it sighed. "You need motivation. You think killing is wrong. You think you can just wait for this out. Let me show you what adaptability looks like." The screen shifted again. This time it wasn't a news studio. It was a classroom. A high school classroom with desks and chalkboards. But the students, girls in plaid skirts, boys in blazers, they weren't studying. They were screaming. I watched, horrified, as a girl no older than 17 raised a chair above her head and brought it down on her classmate. It was brutal, chaotic, and sickeningly real. There was no hesitation in her eyes, only the desperate, weeping desire to live. They were killing each other. Children killing children to satisfy the timer, to survive. See, the Dokkaebi's voice narrated over the carnage. They understand the assignment. One life for another. It's simple math. I looked up from my phone and saw the screen's reflection in the eyes of the passengers around me. I saw the horror, yes, but beneath the horror I saw something else. I saw the calculation. I saw a man look at the woman beside him not as a fellow human, but as a target. I saw hands tightening around umbrellas, around bags, around anything that could be used as a weapon. The veneer of civilization was evaporating, burned away by the image of that classroom. We were no longer commuters, neighbors, or citizens. We were contestants, and the bell had already rung. The soldier looked at me, his eyes wide, pleading for an answer I didn't have. The timer ticked down. 5 minutes, then 4:59 seconds. The air grew heavy with the scent of impending violence. I gripped my phone, and the battery was warm against my palm. The story had begun, and for the first time, I wasn't just reading it. I was going to have to write my way out. Thank you for listening. This story was for you. That was episode 3. The timer is ticking, and the first scenario has truly begun. What would you do in those 10 minutes? Would you freeze, would you fight, or would you look for a loophole? Let me know in the comments below. I read every theory. If you enjoyed this adaptation, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Episode 4 is coming soon, and trust me, you are not ready for who shows up next. Until then, keep reading. Thank you.